Welcome to Media and Monuments podcast, presented by Women in Film and Video in Washington, D.C. Media and Monuments is conversations featuring industry pros speaking on a wide range of topics of interest to media makers.
Welcome, and thank you for joining us for another installment of our recurring segment, How I Got It Made. I'm your host, Candice Bloch. Each month, I sit down with two different WIF members and chat with these filmmakers about one or two of their successfully completed projects. We discuss their journey and process as we delve into how they got it made. On this episode, I have a conversation with Via Bia, and after that, I talk with Harold Jackson III. I am sitting down with Via Bia, an up-and-coming writer and filmmaker with a colorful multicultural background who has already created various successful projects, one of which we're going to discuss today as we chat a bit more about how she got it made. Hi, Via. Welcome to the podcast. We are going to talk about These Colors Don't Run, your 10-minute short from a few years ago. But first off, just to get to know you a little bit more, how did this whole journey begin for you? I understand you started with writing. Is that true?
That's right. I started because I had been living in Mexico, working as a teacher at an international school, and got pregnant and really was loving my time down there. But like the salary was not great. And the place I was living in was like a fifth floor walk up studio. So not super awesome for like a baby. And I found out at the end of the school year and just didn't have time to find like an alternate job down there or anything like that. So very quickly that summer moved up to DC because I was finishing my master's of education at George Mason. And so I was up here for the summer, and my partner and I just wound up staying. He got a job. I applied for a bunch of jobs, but I was like 6-7 months pregnant. Nobody hired me. So such is life. I was home with my baby and just started going back to writing while she was asleep. So I would write personal essays, things that, I'd sort of dabbled with in the past, but never done anything with it until one day I had an idea that sounded like a movie. And I thought, well, why don't I write a movie? I guess. And 2 weeks into that, I was like, it just sort of dawned on me, like I had read lots of plays, like in high school and college. And I was like, well, that has its own really specific format. I suppose that screenwriting does as well. So let me try to figure that out. And I, went to the interwebs and, started reading articles, and then went to the library and got out some books. And fast forward to 10 weeks later, and I had my first draft of my first feature film. Yeah, I skipped shorts.
And you straight to feature film. Wow.
Straight to feature. And, I just kind of thought, like, I don't know if this is any good, but I know that I did this in 10 weeks while learning the form. Mm-hmm. So it's agreeing with me on some level. And I just sort of took it from there. And actually, not too long after that, got involved with, I think, because I had seen online that they were hosting Gordy Hoffman, who's Philip Seymour Hoffman's brother, and is the guy who runs the Blue Cat screenplay competition. Mm. And he was going to be in DC to look at people's scripts and to hold a one-day workshop. And so kind of like at the end of that year, I sent in that script and signed up for that workshop. And that was through WIF. WIF hosted it. Yeah, and that's how I got involved with WIF.
That's awesome. So is writing one of your passions? Sounds like you would do that regardless. We're writing before and you're continuing to write now. So is that one of your first and foremost passion, or?
Yeah, I think I really have had the story to bug since I was little.
So as you've been becoming more of a director, filmmaker, in addition to writer and all of that as well, is there any like particular influences that you have, or any like writers or directors or creators that are inspirations to you that you're either trying to emulate a bit or use them as inspiration?
For sure. Like I'm always really impressed with, Charlie Kaufman's work. I think he's super imaginative. He thinks a lot about memory. And I don't know. There's some shame in there, and I think we all relate to that. He's very imaginative. I like a lot of his stories, and he also lived on Long Island, I believe, for a time, which I did too. And maybe there's something just disgraceful in the water that makes us crazy. I don't know, but I really liked his work. I really liked Agnes Varda, the Belgian French New Wave director who went on to do narrative fiction, also documentary, features, shorts, everything. She was always so curious, and she was always so short, like me. She and I are both very short, and so I have to like.
Oh, how tall are you?
I am not even 5'2", so you know,
okay.
When I see another short director or filmmaker out there, I'm like, I see you, and I am with you.
Yeah.
But yeah, there certainly are a lot of great people, and I know, like with my first film, I definitely was thinking about a specific kind of like Spike Lee shot at one point, which is actually like a Melvin Van Peebles shot in a sense. And I know, like in my more recent movie, I was thinking about a shot from Psycho, Alfred Hitchcock, even though not the same. I think you pull from a lot of different places. So there's always great inspirations. Right now, I really am loving Michaela Cole, who did I May Destroy You. And I had years before seen Chewing Gum, and I just thought she's brilliant, and she's kind of like doing it all. And I think she's amazing.
Yeah. And it seems like from the projects that I've been able to research a little bit on what you've done so far, that you kind of lean into comedy a bit as well. Is that something that you're trying to stay in a lane that way? Or do you like kind of going all over between drama, comedy, dramedy? Do you have like a sci-fi or thriller in your future or anything like that?
My deal is I lean towards comedy and dramedy, and I'm trying to learn a lot more about straight comedy at this point. Like I'm taking a sketch writing class as we speak, and like I'm learning a lot about that. I write, I think left to my own devices, I write a lot of dramedy, but I think I talk about a lot of the same subjects, which, you know, kind of lean towards political, socioeconomic, race, gender, like a lot of heavy themes, but I try to make it accessible and weirdo, kind of silly, funny. So I think I could probably do any genre, but I think it would always kind of feel like my voice. But definitely I kind of lean towards dramedy and comedy at this point.
Yeah. Well, speaking of dramedy, I know that let's start talking about the short that we're going to focus on for this, so we can dive a little more into the specifics of how it got made. So for listeners who haven't seen it, talk to us a little bit about and give us a little overview of what These Colors Don't Run is about.
My log line from it is the memory of a first communion gone down the shitter. So it's a story of a little girl, a Latina, she's 8 years old, and it's her first communion day, and she is made to dress up in her white dress and take all the beautiful first communion photos. And she is told that she may not get her dress dirty, that she needs to sit still and pray, essentially, and study the Bible until she goes to church, to mass. And she may not eat anything because she needs to keep her dress perfect. And she sneaks out of the house and goes to like a local convenience store and buys a whole lot of shit that could potentially stain her dress. And she tries to be careful, but it's hard. It's very hard. And then she sort of starts straying a little further from God.
Well, I don't want to give anything away necessarily, but it's kind of also loosely a story about like discovering where an origin or a love for tattooing might have come. Do you have any tattoos?
I don't. I've always loved tattoos, and yet I am one of the least adorned people I know. Like I basically don't wear jewelry. I don't wear hair clips. I don't. You know, I'm pretty plain. I don't know what my deal is. I'm a huge art fan, but I myself do not like lean into the art of me. So
I mean, clearly if you put hair clip in that category. Yes.
I don't, yeah. I mean, I have hair clips and I've worn them, but I really generally do not wear anything. So, but like when I was in college, I actually did like a paper on, you know, tattooing and old style, like Maori New Zealand tattooing, and I'll just like then interviewed a lot of people about their tattoos. I just think there's so much storytelling and so much memory inside all these tattoos. So I've always felt very strongly that it's so beautiful and so interesting, but I myself have never gotten one, no.
So was some of that your inspiration for writing this, what you had learned before? And also you mentioned the sort of the memories of it all. This is kind of, the format is essentially like a memory, remembering an origin.
Well, by the time I wrote this, I had gotten into a Sundance Lab for Latino screenwriters called the Latino Screenwriting Project. And so it was for a feature film that I had written called The Radish Baby, which is a magical realist story about a man who is a garnish chef and hates children and is about to become a father. And unfortunately, he and his wife lose the baby. And in his grief, his hands just sort of start working in the way that they know. And he carves a baby out of a radish, and that radish comes to life. And so that screenplay had gotten into a Sundance Lab, and I had not made anything. And to that point, as a director, I hadn't shot any shorts of my own. And I just kept hearing from my advisors, you need to start shooting things. You need to start getting your stuff and your voice out there. So some months later, there was an opportunity for like a shorts incubator that I threw my kind of hat in. And although I didn't kind of win the money to make the short, I was one of the final 10 projects or something. I had by then gotten together a team, and I decided I would shoot in LA because this was like a story about a Mexican American family. And I thought this is really, a good place to shoot. There was somebody who came on as producer who she had actually ties. Her husband had been in the same lab I had like a year or two before. And so I, was able to get on some really great collaborators. But when I didn't get into the incubator, when that fell apart, so did kind of like the whole collaboration. And at that point, I asked one of my Sundance advisors who lived in Austin if he would consider producing it, because I knew, again, Austin had a lot of Mexican Americans, and I thought this is great, and it would have the kind of like the right type of locations. And, my advisor, Michael Tully, he was like extremely solid guy. He's from Maryland, from the Baltimore area. And I just thought like, this would be amazing if he said yes. And he's like, I never do this. I don't produce anything, but I'm going to say yes. And I, just really lucked out because has a lot of goodwill in his communities. He's very beloved. And so a lot of people, he introduced me to a lot of different people who wound up saying yes to the project. And I was very lucky to work with some really amazing collaborators out in Austin and get some really kind of beautiful people in on the cast.
Yeah, because I was going to say for people listening that are curious about how you even put a team together and how you find those collaborators, it sounds like it was connections and then how they know and everything. Yeah, was a lot of it, one person knew another person kind of deal? Or how did it originally start? Like, who was your first person that you kind of locked in for this project that led to others?
Well, I started with Michael Tully as producer, and he then asked if Wilson Smith would come on. So Wilson also lived in Austin, and he had very recently just helped produce a film called Krisha. And between he and Mike Tully, they had a lot of people that they had worked with locally. Michael had kind of sent me a few cinematographers to look at. And there was somebody that I wound up working with named Yuta Yamaguchi, who had a really beautiful sensibility. He was very sweet and easy to talk to in person. Mm-hmm. And I just trusted him. I thought he seemed really great. And we just had a lot of like coffees and little lunches with people. And kind of over a period of 2 weeks, I flew out to Austin, and for 2 weeks we set up the film, 2.5 weeks maybe, and finally just shot it so that by 3 weeks the film was done and I flew home.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it was really
it's
fast.
A short, but that sounds short. Yeah.
Yeah. I was a little concerned for sure, but I kind of went into it just thinking, oh, these guys are so well liked in the community, and they're so connected. And I just think this is going to be okay.
If someone is trying to make something and they're daunted by the idea of a whole huge project that is undoubtedly going to cost a lot of money, how did you go about trying to get some funding, and what could someone do to look for how to be starting on a big project like this?
Once I had the project put together for Los Angeles, I started looking into grants and things of that nature. And I would say like in December, I shot in April, but I would say in December, if not January, I applied for a local grant through Arlington County. It's an Arlington County grant for artists. So I applied for an individual artist grant of $5,000 and was, hopeful about that. And I also applied for a production grant through the Love Your Shorts Film Festival for $500. I applied for a few other grants that I did not get, but I did get those two. So that helped quite a bit and had money that I had saved up. And so I had probably, 15 grand or something that I was able to kind of start putting towards just kind of like the production phase or something like that, maybe 10 grand. I can't remember. And then I took my time in post because I had to kind of put myself on austerity, had to slow things down because it was a lot of money and I had to figure out a way to like kind of make back some of that money. So I had a little bit of a slow post, but I was able to like after 7 months of like not buying anything and not going out and working a little bit more and stuff like that.
Sacrificing for your film.
Sacrificing for the film, I was able to finish it. But yeah, I mean, it is truly though, like if the Duplass brothers have taught us anything, it's that you can film yourself doing a weird little short where you're just trying to record an outgoing message for your own machine back when those things were around. When Robert Rodriguez, that kind of like rebel without a film crew feeling where you're just doing all of it, like hats off to you, my friend, but he got like a kidney infection or some shit like that. I mean, he ran himself down. No, not hats off. You worked too hard. Collaborate, Robert.
It seems to have worked out in the end.
It worked out for him super well, though, to be honest. But yeah, that could not be me at this point, at least. But yeah.
It's a lesson to those starting out. Sometimes it's a lot of sacrifice and figuring it out from multiple avenues. So then do you remember when this project felt like it was actually happening? Because it was an idea and you wrote it and then you started assembling a team. But do you remember that moment of feeling like, okay, this is it. We're doing it. We're actually making it.
I mean, yeah. I mean, I think I wrote it around September and then, I got so far in that first incubator, but it fell apart and I was like, well, it's not happening. And I really felt like, okay, this is not happening for a long time. But after like a few days of saying that to myself, I was like, dude, you have a lookbook, you have like these things, you could like actually send them to people and see if they would be interested. See if there's somebody you would want to do it. And I just thought about it and I was like, oh, Michael Tully's the best. And like, he lives in the right location. He has absolutely the kinds of connections and the goodwill in the community that I think like this could work. I want to be able to go somewhere where, I can find a lot of Mexican American actors to do this, film, to cast. This is all perfect. I've been to Austin. I love Austin. So I just sent it off to him and he took a few days to think it over. But I mean, that worked out. So, I mean, I think that was maybe February. And then we shot in early April.
So you shot this on film, correct?
Mostly on film. So
okay.
It's every part of the film that is the memory from the past. That's on Super 16. And we did get support from Kodak as well. They gave us like a 50% off deal. So shout out to Ann Hubble for hooking that up. And I met Ann Hubble through the Stowe story. She was one of the kind of mentor advisors at that lab. And she did work for Kodak on the side. At one point, she was working for Kodak. So she's kind of got that hookup. So what happened was when I didn't even think about shooting on film at first, but when I got out to Austin, Michael Tully had shot on film before and Utah was really interested in shooting on film. And I can't remember how much he had shot on film. I suppose he had at that point, but it's still big rarity. And they were like, well, what do you think about shooting on film? And I was like, oh, for sure. I had taken like a manual film developing class in college, and I was like, oh, freaking love that. Yeah. But isn't it expensive? And they were like, well, maybe we can figure something out. And Michael also happened to know Ann Hubble as well. So all of this stuff really helped. Here's the other thing about in filmmaking is if you can find a piece of the puzzle that will make the other collaborators excited, like we get to shoot on film for this, they might be more willing to come on board this like little project that's, not paying what they're worth. And it might also give the film a better chance in festivals moving forward. So try to think ahead of time what those little things are, make your own little personal checklist and see which of those things you can put in place before you shoot a damn thing, because that can help you in the long run.
What was the casting process like? I know this is a all-female cast, which is...
It is.
And yeah, it sounds like you wanted it to be specifically, you said Mexican-American?
Yeah. It was a story that sort of stemmed from the feature film, and that was a Mexican-American family. So I took one of the characters from that film and sort of gave her own origin story. And so I wanted to kind of be faithful to that, which is why I was like, okay, Mexican-American. But yeah, we did casting with Sarah Dowling in Austin. She's done a lot of local casting for some of those like real Texas kind of films, like Terrence Malick kind of stuff. So she's done a lot of the like locals casting things. And so she went through her Rolodex, but she also put out a call and we had a casting day. And I was just so shocked and thrilled about like people who came from all over Texas to audition for this short that really was paying like the lowest kind of possible, I don't even remember, like $150 a day kind of, or less if you didn't have lines. I mean, it was not fair. It never is. Like when you're making these like little shorts and you're not, in any guild or anything. But I think there's a real hunger for these movies and these roles, and there just are not a lot of roles that come around like this for people. So we had people from 5 hours away or more coming around. We had people from Laredo and people from Dallas and people from Corpus Christi and San Antonio and Houston come all the way to Austin. And it was just really heartening to see all these beautiful faces come.
Yeah. And also, as you said, really proving that there needs to be more roles like this if they were so excited about it.
Absolutely.
And coming from so far. But yeah, that's great. You cast a wide net. It looks like you got some great people for this. Was there anything just overall on looking back on the production of this that surprised you as being easier than you were expecting?
Gosh, I mean, I guess on a certain level, like I think just getting Michael and Wilson on board because they're so connected. There was a lot of people that they could introduce me to, and there was a lot of people who were just extremely experienced and good people to work with. So this idea of just like having those things line up, but also just having a lot of people audition too. We got in this really nice girl, Maggie Celeste, Nela Cantu, and Yesenia Garcia, and Lisa Suarez. We got in all these really wonderful actresses, and they were just so helpful. Like if I needed clothing, because I didn't have like a big budget, like I had the budget for the dresses, but I didn't have a lot of budget for everything else. They were chipping in with their wardrobes. Or my makeup artist, she was helping do sort of like wardrobe double duty. So she kept an eye on the clothes and help with that. Or we almost ran out of film stock, and our second AC, Rachel Barden, said, I have some ends in my freezer, and actually my roommate would probably be psyched as hell if you would take them away from me. So those are yours to use if you run out, which gratefully we did not run out. But on the second day, we were like, we're going to run out. So, all just the goodwill aspect of it, the people chipping in just was really like a beautiful thing. And I just kind of still think about those aspects. It's my favorite thing, the collaboration. And when it's humming along, it's like, oh my God, I'm in a beautiful artistic community. And I love the world.
That is said so often that, it's the project, but it's more so the team and everyone you're working with. And it's the experience in meeting those people and working with those people that tends to last longer as the memory and the actual story you're telling. So yeah. And then sort of the flip of that coin, what would you consider probably the hardest obstacle that you had to overcome to get this done?
I did have a lot to learn about post-production, and I still am learning a lot. I'm very new to filmmaking. So I think just coming on and helming something that, that's a steep learning curve. And I'm still in that learning curve, but I love it so much that regardless of the steepness, like I want to stay with it and just hope that if I treat people with kind of genuine affection and respect as a collaborator, that will be okay for kind of some of the things that I'm still learning technically or otherwise. So I think it's a hard process. I think it's a hard process, and there's just a lot to, even if you're really gifted and you're really technically savvy, you're going to have people stepping on and off, and you just have to pivot all the time.
Right.
So it's difficult, but it is part of it. So gear up, my friends.
Yeah. And it sounds like you did learn quite a bit on this piece, even with the multiple hats that you were wearing, but in the fact that it was digital and film, you had that experience right out of the gate. So that's kind of special too.
And then in the end, it got picked up by HBO. So there was a whole legal aspect and a deliverables aspect that I
wanted to actually talk to you about that now. After everything was done shooting and you were done with all the post-production stuff, how did you go about were you putting it into festivals and all of that stuff? How did you end up getting it out there to the world? Because yes, as we heard, HBO picked it up, which is awesome. So.
Well, let me demystify some things for a second and tell everybody that I sent the film in and it was not completely finished, hoping like somebody would still say yes. So the first round I sent out, I don't know, maybe 10 or 12 festivals with the film that was probably, I would say it was like a locked picture, but there was a lot of elements in post that were not part of it. It had placeholder music. It had, none of the, I think, effects were done. There were several things that were not done. It did not get in anywhere. Zero people.
Ready. Yeah.
Zero people, said yes to that. So I think for a new filmmaker, especially if you're trying to get into a festival with like a decent profile, you're against majority finished films. You're putting your thing in with thousands and thousands of finished films. So it's going to be hard for the programmers, I think, to say yes to you unless you have a body of work or they know you and they say, oh, I totally trust this person. I know their taste, I know their style. It's going to be rad. So if you're like me and you have like literally nothing to show, you need that, because once I did finish the film and sent it in, I started getting into, a lot of festivals. So I just kind of tried to figure out what are festivals that might work. I sent into festivals that focus on Latino stories. And I asked Mike and Wilson and some other people who worked on the film what they recommended. And they gratefully also had a few festivals where they were able to get me waivers. So we sent into a bunch of places. Once I sent in the final, it started getting picked up. And one of the first festivals I went to was the New York Latino Film Festival. And that was just like so special for me because I'm from New York. My family is Puerto Rican from New York City. And so to be able to go back there and be in a festival just surrounded by Latinos and stories about Latinos, and like in this giant Cinépolis in Chelsea that had like, I don't know, 350 seats, 500 seats. I can't remember. It was packed. It was fully packed. And I looked out into the sea of people and it was almost all visually what looked like to me, Latinos. And I was just like, holy shit, I'm around my people. They're enjoying
That sounds
this.
so special.
And it was such a huge win. So definitely like look into festivals that, HBO sponsors or maybe some other people sponsor, because they do have like, 12 shorts a year that they're going to purchase or something like that. And I think, mine was one of the only ones that had like more comedic elements in it. So I think, and it was kind of family-ish. I think that helped. Plus, there was all female Latina cast, and, it's just, there were certain things about it, while not like the most perfect movie, as I was first time filmmaker, there were certain things about it that made it a little bit easier to say yes to.
Yeah, a lot of great selling points. So What are some of your next projects? Because you said this was, this was your first like finish.
This was the first thing I directed.
Okay, you first directed.
Yeah. And so I have a new film that I just finished, November. And so I just sent it out to festivals in December. So I'll start hearing, November, December, I'll start hearing pretty soon where I'm gonna, kind of screen, I guess. So that's this year. And the one that I directed is called Post Comedy. And actually that has another Women in Film tie-in. I applied for a grant, a camera and lighting package grant. It was the first year that they were doing this a few years ago. And it was for films with some sort of a social justice focus. And so I submitted to that and DC Camera and WIF looked it over and gave me the okay. So I was very lucky again. I was able to get, again, great cameras, another Ari, had an Ari for that short that was on HBO. This one is, I got an Alexa Mini and DC Camera just gave us everything on our wish list. I worked with a really very gifted cinematographer named Kunitaro Ohi, who's local.
Yeah, because that was shot in DC, right?
Yeah, that was shot in DC and Northern Virginia. And yeah, so we just had a great package to work with, and we had a really good gaffer who had some more supplies too, named Taylor Rush, and he brought a bunch of stuff, and we had other great female grips that did some really good work too with the lighting.
Awesome. So those haven't come out yet, but These Colors Don't Run, it came out a few years ago. If someone wanted to see it now, is there a way that they could see it now?
You're going to have to contact me, my friend.
Oh, not... okay. You don't have anything available to rent or purchase or?
No, I actually haven't looked. I haven't even looked into that at this point. I've just been so busy focusing on kind of writing some new projects and working on these other shorts and taking some classes that I haven't even started to think about that. But yeah, I guess I would really love it to be picked up somewhere else or to stream it somewhere really good. So yeah, if anybody wants to contact me and give me a heads up about some good places, I'm listening.
Before we wrap up and people can find out how to get to know a little bit more about your work and yourself, is there any advice that you would like to give to any aspiring filmmakers about a piece of advice that maybe you wish you had, when you were getting into this?
I mean, I don't know that I'm going to say anything new, but I'm just going to tell you, I believe in you. I think your voice is important. I went into this because I think that there needs to be an expansion of different types of stories out there. We need to see a diversity in the roles that are being portrayed out there, an expansion of roles so that people aren't pigeonholed. We need diversity behind the camera. We need diversity on the page. We need people from all different backgrounds, wherever you come from, whatever you look like, whatever your story is. You can get into this. I grew up poor with not a lot of different opportunities. I didn't go to a great school. I, didn't have a lot of money to make this. It took me time to get some money together, but it was important to me. And if this is important to you, do it. Stick with it. It's so rewarding. It's really can be really hard, and you might have some heartbreaks in there, but try to attract people to you that are really into the story, if at all possible. If they seem excited and they're down for the discovery game and they want to help, just be with those people, but always respect them. Always give them your attention and your love, and try to make something beautiful together. That's what's important.
So if anyone wants to know more about you and what you're working on and upcoming stuff, what is the best way to see that? On
Instagram, I'm on Via, that's VIA _dear, DEAR, like darling, kind of so darling. And on Twitter, I'm at just Via Dear. There's no underscore anywhere. And my website is viabia.com. You can find me there. Hit me up. Let's be friends. Don't get too weird. I don't dig that. I like weird, but it depends. So
there is a line, yeah.
May I also just shout out Jax Baitis, who is mi comadre. She's my bestie out there, and she She produced with me, co-wrote with me, and starred in Post Comedy. She is a WIF member. She is a beautiful person in the world. And if you can make films with your friends, like I was able to make films with Jax or other collaborators I worked with before, like Robin Noonan Price and Alison Bauer and lots of other people, try to do that. Try to find your people, and if they're cool, hold tight to them and keep going.
I'm sitting down with DC-based filmmaker Harold Jackson III today. Harold has produced, written, and directed multiple films, documentaries, and series, and today we're going to discuss one of his most recent features as we delve a little bit more into how he got it made. First of all, we're going to talk today about The Forgettable Life of Liam White.
Yeah.
First, kick it off with just to get to know you a little bit more before we get into the film itself. How did you get into filmmaking, and when did you begin really leaning into wanting to be a writer and director and decide that this was your path?
Yeah, I probably was always a filmmaker. I don't remember wanting to do anything else with any sort of passion except for baseball and filmmaking. So I've probably always been a filmmaker. Like my family, I only have one brother, but I have a very large extended family. So I have a lot of cousins and uncles and stuff like that. And we would always meet in one particular place. And one of the ways that we sort of bond as a family was to watch movies or TV. And if you imagine those old pictures you saw when a family sort of gathered around the radio, we were like that at probably my grandmother's house, and there weren't enough seats for everyone, and so the kids were on the floor, and we'd watch like the Cosby Show or Martin or something like that. And I just think I'm a relatively quiet person, but my family isn't, so they're pretty boisterous. So they're the talk to the TV type of people. So just being young and seeing what films and TV and good storytelling can do to people was something that always excited me.
So you are a writer, director, producer. You do a lot. I know you've got background in lots of other parts of it as well, editing and whatnot. So is there any particular director that might be, or filmmaker that is an inspiration to you, someone you kind of hope to emulate, or do you want to just be your own unique thing or combo of people?
Yeah, I only have one really director that I sort of gravitate towards and what they do. The rest I like certain movies. And I think with everyone, myself included, some films you hit a home run, some films you strike out, some films it's a line drive, good enough to get by. So it's no filmmaker has a perfect catalog, right? So I really gravitate towards certain films rather than particular directors. But the one director that I do identify with the most, I think, is Sidney Lumet. And I just like it. Something about his style speaks to me. It can be very over the top, and it's a lot of music and a lot of just characters yell at each other and that sort of stuff. Still, yeah.
So you like sort of loud, vibrant, musical type things.
Let's go big.
All right, well, let's get right into it then. So for listeners who don't know what the movie is about, tell us a little bit more about Liam White.
So now that I gave you all that information, Liam White is a very small film. It's about a writer who is, sort of the synopsis is a writer who's diagnosed with a terminal illness, goes on his journey to try to figure out who he was as a person and sort of reconnect with all the people that helped mold him for better or for worse. But really what the film is about is it's about that transition in life that we all go through, where we have to sort of give up something to become the new person. So kind of if you want to go somewhere you've never been, you have to do something you've never done. It's that kind of idea played out through his illness, right? So it's really about transitioning in life and what you have to do to get rid of and a previous part of your life and start a new part of your life. So with that said, it sounds like it could be a downer, but it's not. It's actually pretty funny. I think it's pretty funny. It has a bit of a holiday feel to it, a bit of a Christmas-y touch to it. And there's a lot of music There's a lot of, it's a very art housey kind of film, but it's still sort of, it can still sort of get down in the dirt with humor. So it's a really interesting sort of take on the subject matter, and it turned out to be a really fun and interesting film.
Was there a particular inspiration for doing this story at this time? Or, because I know you've done a lot of different types, a lot of different stories through your different films.
Well, I'm all over the place.
Did anything bring this subject to light, or anything that you wanted to lean into?
I'm a bit all over the place, so I really write from where I am at the particular time. So if you want to learn about me, you can probably just watch my films, and you won't even have to talk to me. You'll know. You'll know exactly who I am. But this particular film, I was in a bit of a transition stage in my life. I wrote it, I can't remember if I wrote it right before the pandemic or during it, but we shot it during the pandemic. And you see that in the film. We made reference to it and where the world was at that particular time. But I was really in a transition stage in my life. I was recently married and sort of trying to figure out where I was going to go next in life. So it was sort of I mean, all films that any writer writes should have a piece of them in it. So I think if anything in it, it was that feeling of uncertainty moving from one stage of your life to the next, and having to, sometimes you romanticize the old life, and then sometimes you realize how much you need to move past it. And it's that sort of back and forth that people do when it's time to move on from something and move into something.
It sounds like it was right at the start of the pandemic, if not a little on the cusp of it. Was this your first feature done in the pandemic, or first project that you had to deal with working in a pandemic setting?
I did some commercials during the pandemic, but after shooting Liam White. But I think Liam White was the production. It was at that stage where, like, Hollywood had shut down and people were kind of like, we're just going to try to do it. And there were it was at that early stage where a handful of filmmakers in LA were saying, we're just going to be safe and try to work. We can't starve. And I sort of said, you know what, they're right. So we took all the precautions. We did the tests, we did the masks, we wiped everything down. So we did the whole drill to keep people safe. But at some point, you have to just push through these sort of things, mm-hmm. and come out on the other end. So it was interesting. I didn't have time to think about it because there was so much that needed to be done, just mm-hmm. making a film in general.
So when did you realize that this was officially underway and starting, and you were making this film, as opposed to it just being an idea of an upcoming one or written or whatever? Do you remember day one, or what you consider day one?
I don't really, on that note, I don't kind of remember day one, but I do know there is a point in the process. Even when I'm writing, there's projects that I've written that I know I'm not going to make this. It's too big, or it's not big enough. But I like the process of creating a story from beginning to end, and I always make it a point to finish what I start. So I'll do that regardless of if I'm going to shoot it or not. But there usually comes a point in the writing process where I know, okay, I'm going to make this, and I can see it. And so I knew I was going to make it when the script was there. And I knew that the world was changing. I knew where I was financially. I knew the type of money that I could scare up to make a film. So it was really inside of this sort of vacuum of what I could bring to the table, what I could create, what I could do. And it all sort of came together and worked out.
So you tend to write, produce, and direct a lot of your mm-hmm. pieces. Is that out of sort of necessity in the indie film world, or is it your choice to have full creative control over things by being the writer and director?
Early in my career, it was my choice to have full control over things, and I want to do it my way, et cetera, et cetera. But the older you get, the more you still want to make work that feels good to you, but sometimes you want to just sort of not have to worry about everything. I've taken jobs where I just had to direct, and I'm in service of someone else's sort of vision. And there's nothing wrong with that. I've had a great time doing that, and I've been successful doing that as well. But for an indie producer, if you don't make your own work, like my phone very seldom rings, right? And I don't think it doesn't ring because everybody's trying to do their own thing. So no one has time to come get you and come save you. And you got to be able to do your own work and believe in yourself enough to get out there and do it. And I do. I'm very confident in my ability as a filmmaker. So it's never a question. I never get shaken when I realize I'm taking on a new project. But it is a matter of if I don't do this, then I'll be waiting 2, 3, 4, 5 years for someone to come get me.
So you're kind of impatient. You want to get it done.
Yeah, it's not what I want to do. I want to actively be telling stories. So I don't want to wait 3 years to make a movie and then another 3 to make another one. That's just not how I want to live my life.
Do you plan to keep pushing forward then? It sounds like with a lot of your personal projects still taking on all those roles within that, but then still feathering in ones where you're just the writer or just the director?
Somewhat. I'm completely open to doing for hire work. I have no problem with that. And I give everything I do 100%. But my team is getting a little bigger and a little more proficient and efficient with each project. So I'm really getting into a space where it's easier for me to make films now. The machine is running better and everyone is sort of starting to see through the matrix of how to do it. And it's helping the end product. So with each film, I'm bringing on one more person or two more people to help make the process a little easier for me. And then in turn, make our chances of success a lot easier as well.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like you have a solid team of people that you work with over and over again. And these films have like kind of a core group that you collaborate with?
Yeah. I got some core people in each film. You lose 1 or 2, you gain 2 more. It's the business. But yeah, I have a sort of a core team that kind of gets me now, and they kind of know where I'm trying to go and what I'm doing and what I'm thinking. And even when they don't understand it, I think they believe in me enough to know that, hey, I don't know what he's doing, but it always gets done. So whatever.
Well, and as we know, productions are all team efforts. In this particular film, who do you think might be like an MVP, one of the people that helped you get it done, where if they weren't a part of this, it might not have happened? So
a couple of people. I'm hesitant to sort of single out people because I think it was definitely a super team effort, and we had brought in bigger actors than we had ever done before during a pandemic, and it was just like everybody sort of stepped up in that way. So I'm really proud of the team for that. But my producer, Wendy Anderson, she's been great, and she's been a ride or die for me for a long time. And we've done, I think, maybe 3 or 4 projects together. And I think the synergy is there now, and we kind of get it. And we're moving on to the next stage of where we're past the stage where we can get things done. Now we're moving to the stage where we're taking it up a notch, and I'm really excited about that. Another producer, a line producer that I had that sort of came in last minute and saved the day, her name is Keoka Rhodes, and she was very helpful in the process. So you have people that you use time and again on the production side. You also work with some of the same actors multiple times. Do you write with those actors in mind now for some of your characters, or do you pretty much do the character and then think about casting after? Sometimes I write for some people that I knew. So as far as Liam White, I wrote the film with Sean in mind. Actually, that character was part of a series, a short series a mini series that I wrote. And then ultimately, when I finished writing the series, I just realized, okay, this isn't that good. I mean, it was fun, but this is not going to cut it. So I scrapped the series. But there was one sort of side character in the series named Liam that for some reason I really liked out of that series, and gave him his own spinoff of it. So an unforgettable character from a series became the lead in a story with a title about him being forgettable. Forgettable life, yeah. Yeah. Okay, well, it's amazing how things happen. So in terms of your particular style for filmmaking and everything, if you were to ask someone on your team what your style is, what do you think they would say? I don't know. That is a very interesting question. I don't know. And part of it is because I've been kind of finding myself over the years. So if you look back through my catalog, I think you made reference to it at the beginning of the interview. Like, it's a bit all over the place. And I'm sure if someone watches them, they'll say, okay, there's a through line, and the through line is this. It's definitely the core of it all is drama, but I think morphing into a place where the drama is a lot larger and a lot more exciting.
So in an action sense or production value or deep, bigger story?
At this stage, it's a production value deal. And I think I think I'm becoming closer to setting the limit as I get older.
You're evolving to where you want to be. It all takes time. It's all a process.
Yeah, and you start off early, and you start doing all these things to try to make it make sense, right? You start writing whatever it is you feel like writing, and then nobody watches it, so you start writing what you think people want, and then nobody watches it. Then you start trying to mix the two, and nobody watches it, and then eventually you land on, if I'll just do what I want to do, and then miraculously people start watching.
So it sounds like you do a lot and you do them pretty quickly back to back. So this isn't your first piece and it definitely won't be your last, it sounds like. So do you focus on more than one project at a time, or when you're in it, are you solely focused on that? Or are you kind of still wrapping up the previous and looking ahead to the next?
I try not to mix projects. So I try not to, once I start one, I try to go from beginning to end with it and see it at the finish line. And then in the back of my mind, I'm floating what my next thing is going to be. But I try not to be producing a new project while I'm in the edit.
Say, is it the same with writing, where you just kind of finish one project and then move on? Or do you have a few things started at the same time ever?
No. The film that I'm producing now was probably the first time in a long time that I had to put a film down to produce another film. A thriller came up and people were excited to do it. So I jumped on it, but I was probably about 70% through a script that I had planned on producing. But I jumped on that film and I did that film and it turned out really nicely, a film called Gaslight. And so I had to put the script down, but I recently picked it up and I'm moving into production on that film in March.
Now you're quite accustomed to the pandemic production life, it sounds like.
Yeah, like at the end of every project, you hope that the world's going to be back normal for the next one, and it's just not. So you build it into the budget, you take the precautions, you be safe, you try to take everyone's health into consideration at all turns, but you can't let it stop you.
Is there any particular thing that you learned from this movie that you hope to take with you to utilize in a future? From
Liam White, you know what I learned? I made Liam at a time where I just needed to work. There was a bit of a lull between the film before that and Liam White. And I need to work. I need to express myself in some way. So I wrote a film that was capable of being pulled off. It's doing really well and it's resonating with people, and people that watch it, they're contacting me out of the blue, random people, and they're telling me how much they liked it. If it's not what the character went through, it's the sort of the texture of it, or if it's just not the texture, it's the music or something, like it's resonating with people. And what I realized is when I made Liam White, I was really like, nobody's going to watch this, right? In theory, you've seen this movie already. A writer has a terminal illness and he writes his best book or whatever. And it's not that. But as far as the synopsis goes, you've seen that movie, but it's totally different. But I think I was just like, you know what, just do what you want, make a good film, and the chips fall where they may. And it's been my most successful film. It was the film that I sort of let myself go, let myself be as free as possible since probably my first film that sort of people noticed, which was Last Night. Between now and last night, there was always some other thing I was thinking about, whether it be, I want to do an action film, or, this is a timely film, or whatever. This was just something I did because I just wanted to express myself. And it's been my most successful film, yeah.
So do you think you're going to be trying to do more authentic films just that you really, really want to do moving forward?
Yeah, I think what I've learned over the years is you can't halfway do anything. So you can't halfway sell out. You can't halfway be authentic. You can't halfway do anything. So if you're going to have to go full steam, you might as well go full steam doing what you want to do. Now, with that said, I'm also a businessman, and I also realize that this is not a hobby. So these films need to make money, especially now that I've evolved to a place where I have investors and people I need to pay and all this sort of stuff. So I take that into consideration when I'm casting and when I'm writing and when I'm doing all this. But when it comes time to get on set and do the thing, I want to do what I think is right and what I feel is right versus think about money all the time. I mean, they got professionals. They got guys in suits with no ties and slick hair. They can figure out how to sell a movie. Yeah, I just need to make a good one.
Speaking of your passions, do you have a baseball movie in your future?
I do.
Okay.
It is a very interesting movie that I've been thinking about for years, and I don't think I've ever told anyone. So
exclusive. You're hearing it here first.
It is a movie about the year leading up to when Jackie Robinson was moved into professional baseball and broke the color barrier and all that stuff. But it's set in the Negro League of baseball, and it's really a story about them, and it's this fictional story about this team of sort of ragtag guys who go all the way to the championship in the last year that they know that they have any sort of security in the game. Because once Jackie Robinson breaks the color barrier, which everyone knew was coming, they know that their game is going to be dismantled in some shape, form, or fashion. So it's about that last year that they knew if you don't get it now, then you may not ever get it.
Mm-hmm. Do you think you might play a role in that? Play some baseball on camera?
No. I'm
in the background.
I'm in retirement age.
Okay.
Now.
Okay.
But yeah, it'll be it'll be if
you can be a coach.
Yeah, I can be a coach.
Yeah.
I have a cigar in my mouth and be grumpy.
Yeah, and then you could live out truly being a baseball player as well.
I did. I made it.
Well, that sounds exciting. I mean, I'm sure it's not going to be too far down the line. You do things quickly. So
yeah. If things keep going the way they're going, life will hand it to me real soon.
Is there any advice that you would give to someone who's trying to produce a film or get a film created in some way, shape, or form? I know you wear multiple hats in your thing, so you could take it from either a perspective as a writer, producer, director, or a combo of each of those. But what kind of advice, other than just like giving it 100%, but what advice would you give to someone who is interested in becoming a filmmaker?
My biggest advice is you should really be a student of film. If you take that to mean get formal schooling, then take it to mean that. If you don't take it to mean that and you don't want to go down that route, given the fact that this is not a science, this is an art, you can learn this art through other means other than formal schooling. But you have to go to school at some shape, form, or fashion. You have to learn this craft. I'm a bit of a cinema purist, so I'm a little bit more protective of the craft than probably most, and I'm a little more precious about it than probably most. But what I've learned is not probably 60-70% of the people doing this don't know how to tell stories properly. So if you know how to tell a story properly, you'll always have a job. And then if you can take that sort of foundation and add some pizzazz to it and spice it up, you can separate yourself from the crowd. So go to school in some shape, form, or fashion before you try to make a movie. And a lot of guys won't tell you that. They'll tell you, just get a camera and do it. And you'll waste a lot of money that way.
Well, finally, if anyone wants to see this film, how would you recommend they best do that? What are the ways they can go see Liam White?
So The Forgettable Life of Liam White is available if you have the Roku channel, if you have the internet, you have the Roku channel. You can see it there for free, or you can get it on Disney Plus, iTunes, YouTube, Amazon Prime, Vudu, a bunch of other places you can get it there. But definitely see it, The Forgettable Life of Liam White. You can also learn more about me at HaroldJackson3, the number 3.com. Or at Harold Jackson 3 is another way to find me. And then also you can learn about my production company at 8picturehouse.com.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your insights. Hopefully listeners will learn some things, get excited, check out your work. Thanks again for joining us today.
No, thank you for having me. This was fun.
Thank you for listening to Media and Monuments, a service of Women in Film and Video in Washington, D.C. Please remember to review, rate, and subscribe wherever you listen to this podcast. For more information about WIF, please visit our website at WIF as in Frank, V as in Victor.org.